First of all, I enjoyed your presentation. I agree with all what you said.
It's all right.
I think it is working, but the idea of Buddhist inner happiness is very familiar personally to me because I'm also from Korea and I like Buddhist teaching and I've read some materials about it. And also, in some sense, first of all, I can comment that your Buddhist inner happiness brings a new dimension or perspective in understanding happiness, because the idea of happiness has been discussed in many other, for example, from Bhutan, there's an example of already applying the happiness concept, but also there are the books of happiness that are written by economists, and there are many interesting books on happiness written by economists from Europe and others. So your idea of inner happiness brings a new perspective. To a certain degree, I already feel that in Thailand, the reason why Thailand is ranked very high on happiness ranking in the world, I remember there was a very interesting survey I read from the internet. Thailand was ranked one of the top 5 happy country in the world. Thailand was the only country from Asia Pacific within 10 or something like ranking 10, because the rest of the countries are all, most of them are from Latin America. They're all from Latin America, where the way of life is quite different. And but Thailand was the only country that was ranked as a happy country, ranked like 5 or 5th or something like that. The reason I believe already is because the people in Thailand is already accept or following the inner happiness of Buddhism already to a quite certain degree. So that's why the society in Thailand seems to me a lot more friendly, or the happier the relations between the people among the Thai people looks a lot more happier and friendlier to each other. So the tension or some competition or that kind of thing might be a little less than other countries. This is what I felt. If you go to Manhattan, New York, you feel like that it's like a jungle. Everybody seems to be competing each other to find more money. So, but in Thailand, still, even though Thailand is a middle-income developing country, but still, majority of the people still remain quite not that competitive, and the tensions are not that high. In that sense, it's already, in Thailand, I think it's already being followed by many Thai people here. The problem or the issues or challenging for Buddhist in happiness concept is that how can we operationalize it? That's a very different dimension. On the concept wide, I don't have any disagreement. It's perfect. You can bring in new element in social development concept, even human development concept. That's right. You are bringing in very new different perspectives, very relevant. But I don't think we can be satisfied with that. We should think about how to operationalize it. Without operationalizing it, I think this can be just preaching from a Buddhist monk. So it couldn't be any more effective, because it can be only effective only within the Buddhist country. Because if you go to in Middle East and talk about Buddhist inner happiness, I don't think they'll follow it, because it's a Buddhist. They are Muslim, right? So I think the boundary or limitations of Buddhist inner happiness may be remaining mainly to the Buddhist countries. There is a kind of but more fundamentally, the reason, I don't think this inner happiness idea has been already there from Buddha's days, or thousands of years ago. Already the idea of happiness was there, right? But then why but our life and the current civilization is not that level? Why still we are like this? Yeah, because we have that kind of teaching already for thousands of years. So the reason is, I think one of the fundamental reason is, this kind of inner happiness thing is like anti-materialism and controlling our greed. But can anti-materialism, as you say, yes, it is true that we can save resources if we only follow inner happiness. That's true. But can that kind of paradigm generate jobs and enough materials that can be shared by all the poor people to lift them out of poverty? That is one issue. So the reason why, in spite of all the problems, why the capitalism is still so strong, and why everybody is cannot get out of capitalism or market principle, is because we still believe that market and capitalism is the only way we can generate the jobs and the material prosperity for to be shared by. So that's the only way increasing the total volume of material prosperity to be shared by. But the sharing is another issue. I think the market is very good in increasing the quantity of the production, but it's not very good at in sharing or the efficiency of doing this kind of things. So that's why we need this extra new perspectives and paradigms to supplement the market mechanism. But I think there are ways we can change the market mechanism. But there are many simple ways of changing the market mechanism. Simply, we cannot do it because of the greed by those who are rich and powerful. For example, if we want to share, or if we want to save too much resource abuse, we can introduce resource consumption tax. Very simple, like a carbon tax. It's very simple. Then we can solve the climate change issue. But as you know, introducing carbon tax is almost impossible. Why is it impossible? Because people still believe that, oh, I need more materials to lift my material prosperity. And also they believe that if we control or introduce carbon tax, then the economy will go down. So we will lose our jobs. That's the fear. So they don't want to do it. And that is a kind of ecological dimension. But on a social dimension, now we are seeing widening income gap between the rich and poor is getting wider and wider. So there's a very simple solution for it. The solution is we can introduce high tax on the rich and recycle it back to the poor. Very simple. Or we can invest for education, which is for social investment, or social protection, or medical care, health care. We can do it. But it's never been done, except in European countries, northern European countries. Please, I always find that the good example from Nordic European countries, like Sweden, Norway, Finland, Denmark, even up to maybe Netherlands, or even Germany. They have a very high tax on the rich, and they also have a carbon tax. These are the countries now enjoying highest level of social development as well as ecological protection and also economic competitiveness. We already, whenever we do survey, Finland, Sweden or Norway are ranked happiest country as well as economically most competitive country. So it already shows that the high tax on the rich is Sweden. The tax on the rich is 69%. 69% of the rich. In the country of Norway, there's no tax evasion because all your bank account is very transparent. There's no way of corruption. So you have to pay 69%. Right? In Germany too.
But in many developing countries, the riches, are they paying enough tax? Even in the United States, Warren Buffett said he is paying only 16% of tax, while his secretary is paying 35%. Because in the United States, the maximum highest level of income tax is only 35%. But for the capital gains tax, it is only 16%. So Warren Buffett making billions of dollars, but he pays only 16% tax. So he asked to raise the capital gains tax so that I can pay more tax. He is asking for it. It's a very honest rich, right? But how many those rich people in developing country? I don't see anybody in Korea who are saying, oh, I will pay more tax. No, I don't see anybody like this. This shows that if we are following inner happiness of Buddhism, but there are other people who will be enjoying, the non-followers will be benefited more. Because these guys will enjoy more materialism. While Kunsuala is following lower materialism, but there are other people who are taking advantage of it, and then they enjoy and they go for more materialism, right? So because there's no guarantee, this rule can be applied to everybody, right? It is only for those who follow this rule. But there are some who will not follow these rules because it's just a moral ethics and there's no penalty. So the issue is how can it translate into, so whether we, if you introduce kind of a concept, there are some people who will take advantage of it and using it for their own material happiness. So they will be enjoying it. And another issue of this inner happiness concept is, can you guarantee that everybody follows inner happiness and go for lower material consumption? That's fine. But is there any guarantee inner happiness can promote sharing among the people? It just reduces the material consumption level. But there's no clear mechanism in inner happiness that unless people with a lot more material than they need, if they give it to somebody else, yeah, feel happy. But I'm not sure whether it is systematically guaranteed by inner happiness thing. Whether Buddhism, but I have not seen many, in Korea also we have Buddhism, but I have not seen many Buddhist foundation supporting the poor. We have many scandals, even with the Buddhist monks. They have a lot of money because people donate a lot of money to the temple. But we don't know where this money is going. We never know where this money is going. They only built huge statues of Buddha, and they are even the Buddhist monks enjoying going around the world with the business class and even first class and like this. So we don't know where the money is going, and we don't have that kind of a foundation or a Buddhist foundation that is doing sharing or charity work for the society. We don't have that kind of thing. I'm not sure entirely. But so whether that can be translated into sharing and supporting with the poor and others. So and for your comment on SDG, yes, that's true. SDG will be simply another extension of MDG. So they call it MDG plus or MDG plus plus or MDG plus plus plus. So they all see SDG as an extension of MDG. That's true. So there is no, as you say, this kind of spiritual dimension is there. It's only a pursuit of material satisfaction or material prosperity. That's why, or jobs. So to me, I think there are many experts here. Unless we don't change the market mechanism or how the economy is functioning now by introducing new tax system like ecological tax or capital gains tax or the rich tax, that kind of, with a social tax like that, without such kind of a tax reform, I think it will be very difficult to translate inner happiness into the real instrument or operationalize it. But there are ways of doing it. But as you know, if we try to introduce high tax on the rich, I'm not sure how many countries the powerful and the rich will accept that kind of a tax reform. So this is the kind of situation and challenge. But it is not only the challenge only for Buddhist inner happiness issue. It is a challenge for all the social development or happiness approach in general. This is or market mechanism, or this is a challenge for all higher development issues now. We are, even for climate change, the negotiation in climate change, we never go any further. I was involved in the climate negotiation. Why we cannot make any progress? Because everybody obsessed about short-term maximization of material gains. They never move one step forward of looking into the long-term quality of life or quality of development. They never. So the level of the countries and the level of current UN debate at the UN level is remaining, unfortunately, at the very, very low level of fighting each other to share, to have, all the countries are fighting each other as a competitor to make, have a guarantee of sharing, having more share of the limited resources. So the countries are competing to fight for larger share of limited resources. So rather than long-term cooperation for common prosperity, this kind of thing never happens. So in a way, I'm a little bit skeptic for the human future. So we need these kind of things, yeah. But we need a lot more of this kind of teachings. That's true, in a way. But I'm not quite sure how far we can operationalize this. So I think it's a common challenge that I'm going to answer for. Yeah, thank you. I think it's impossible because SDG is being negotiated by diplomats from the countries all over the world. And they are fighting like hell. And not to make any kind of concession, they want to make sure, it will not make any more ODA burden on me, for example, to develop the country perspective. They don't want to accept any kind of increasing ODA, so no more ODA burden. But the developing country insists, we have to have a guarantee that you guys have to put more money on the table. So this kind of fighting. So it is being negotiated. It is not written by some people like you. It is going to be written by the diplomats, fighting each other to have just a larger share of the limited resources. Sorry for that. I'm sorry.
I understand. Now we invite Kashi.
Thank you, Kumsala. I found a very important and useful presentation, and a lot of resonance because I come from Bhutan. Cross-national happiness, proposed new paradigm based on cross-national happiness. So many similarities and in motivation and spirit. And also thank you to Dr. Chok for right up front pointing out the serious challenges to such kind of proposal, because I think sometimes even me working on GNH, we tend to get a bit idealistic. We think about the big vision, and it's good to be reminded of the harsher realities. But at the same time, I would think, since you already spoke, maybe just also partially in response to that, just say that, of course, these challenges are there. The culture, strong culture of consumerism, the strong interest of corporations, the world system. All of these are there as challenges to this kind of thinking, but at the same time, I think we have come to a point where globally there is wider recognition now that there are so many different crises facing the world, whether it's ecological, economic, social crisis of governance. People recognize this, and that's why there's a big dissatisfaction the world over And I think that's partially why the United Nations has also tried in its own way to respond by including more people in the post-2015 agenda discussions. I don't know how genuine or far-reaching that is in terms of really taking on people's true aspirations and views, but at least it seems that they also recognize that there's great dissatisfaction with the status quo. So I think maybe people who are now proposing alternative ways to thinking about growth and development have to use this as one of the starting point or context, by pointing out that the business as usual scenario is just not working. It is about the sustainability of Earth itself, heading towards self-destruction. And I think we need to also be able to speak the language of, say, maybe the other side, whether it's the economists or, So basically just reach out from that point. So that's just my brief response because the challenges were being pointed out. But Kun Solak was asking, so do we need a new paradigm, change in mindset? And certainly, I think this is what you have proposed. And that is so important because I think, the old system where GDP has been the central measure of progress, it also started from a certain perspective. Kun Solak pointed out, how, well, in your paper it was in more detail, the way of thinking, that kind of assumption. So you have a certain paradigm, certain understanding of progress, which is mainly, according to how much a country's GDP is. So you already measure society according to that yardstick, but we can propose an alternative way of looking at progress and development, and that is by saying that it is not all about growth. There are many other things which are important for human life, for life of all sentient beings, coming from a Buddhist perspective. So the starting point is really a new vision. It may be idealistic, but I think our actions and our outcomes will only be as good as our vision. So if we start with a bad vision or a faulty vision, like higher GDP being the main measure of progress, then we are going to go on the wrong path. We are going to do anything to achieve a high GDP, irrespective of the consequences on the environment or the social consequences. So even if it's idealistic, we have to start with the, I think, more realistic view, which is that, again coming from the Buddhist context, that all life is interdependent. We all depend on each other. The ecological system also depends. There is an ecosystem, and our actions don't exist in isolation. Whatever we do has an effect. And I think once we align our views, our very basic view, to a more holistic way of thinking, then we can start to also think about what are the actual practical implementation or solution ideas for different problems facing the world. And so here I just again want to say that Kun Solak's paper was very good because it already tries to give different understanding and interpretation of what happiness is. Not just, happiness tends to get so trivialized, not only in Western societies, in our own societies. The moment we say happiness, it becomes so trivialized, like it's very based on the material gratification. So it also tends to get commercialized or used as a marketing strategy now, because the happiness debate, well, the discourse on happiness as a way of looking at development is gaining momentum, and we already have corporate bodies capitalizing on that. If you look at Coca-Cola or the Lay's chips company, they are already using the happiness tagline. So, yes. So I think your attempt at, using our own wisdom source, which is Buddhism for Thailand and also for Bhutan and many other countries, why not? We should draw from this source that we already have and use it for a deeper understanding of happiness, which is also what gross national happiness tries to do. It draws inspiration from Buddhism, because Bhutan is a Buddhist country. And also the New Paradigm Initiative, which is what I'm representing today, is also drawn from GNH and the Buddhist principles. But we don't spell it out that this is based on Buddhism, but it is understood that we come from a Buddhist context. So that's the thing. So the main point I'm trying to make is that it is important to have start with a good vision. And I think the Buddhist way of understanding our existence and our reality is a very good source to draw from. I think, again, the practical difficulty, as Dr. Chong has pointed out, is how to implement. And I think he also mentioned that maybe for Buddhist countries it is easier, but I'm sorry to say that not necessarily easier. Maybe people can understand the concept more easily because we are quite familiar with the discourse, but not only in Thailand but also in Bhutan. I think the challenge will be just as difficult because, we may say we're Buddhist and we agree with the values, but the culture of consumerism, the habit is so strong. I see here in Bangkok, today we had an interesting conversation in the van. We were told about, maybe last year, there was a policy by the Thai government to give certain subsidy for Thai people who are purchasing a vehicle for the first time in their life. It's a Buddhist country, but such kind of policy is promoting more consumerism. And even in my own country, in Bhutan, we talk about culture values, Buddhist values, but in action we do the total opposite. So, just to add,
or even in Bhutan,
maybe we don't have so many products readily available, so it is limited because of the geographical reality. But I'm just saying the habit of consumerism and the wants over needs is so strong. So we may agree with the ideas, but just that the challenge is even more intensified in terms of implementation. But also, I just wanted to, I think, pick up on some of the main points from Kun Solat's paper, which I thought are starting points for very practical application of the ideas, whether it's new paradigm kind of ideas or the Buddhist way of thinking in economics. You pointed out that in this line of thinking, the society would encourage more human relationship and interaction in economy. So basically, it's about mindful production and consumption, and this is very important for sustainability, future global sustainability, because already when you talk about limiting, focusing on what we need rather than what we want, then already there should be a reduction in how much we consume, the natural resource extraction, because there's a certain demand. When people want more goods, then there's more demand, and then there'll be more production to cater to these demands. So in that way, I think there's a very strong link to sustainability as well as the environment, because if there's reduction in demand on the resources, then also carbon emissions will hopefully reduce. Also, I think the health implications are also there, because if there's reduction in, say, having to import a lot of goods from faraway countries, a lot of out-of-season foods, all of these new studies that point to the kind of nutrition we should have. Try to stick to seasonal foods, try to stick to locally produced, because these tend to be less sort of polluted with fertilizers and other sort of cancer-causing agents. So I think the potential is very much there, and I feel what maybe in your paper, in order to go further, maybe these are the kinds of things that could be developed, sort of showing very practically how can we take this big idea and show that it is possible, that it is actually a very sensible proposal. Because again, without showing a bit of that practical side, it might again get lost to people who are maybe making the decisions or making the policies. So I think in this age especially, nobody wants to read a thesis or a long paper. You want the solution up front very fast. So I think along with this comprehensive research or comprehensive background as the source from Buddhism, as very practical actions, if that can also be developed. I think that would be a very useful contribution to the current discourse. And I think maybe the last point I want to say is, perhaps we need to target such kind of discourse not only to the policymakers and decision makers, but because after all they are the ones who are going to make the decisions that affect the system that we function in, whether it's the tax system. But also, there's so much of the civil society movement right now. I think in each of our countries and the world over, the demand from the grassroots, as Professor Kusako has been talking about also, people have to show that they want a change in the system. So the mindset that you talked about, that has to be changed at all the levels. It's not only decision makers, but also at every level, because people have to demand, the decision makers have to respond. So basically it is a very big job, but I want to congratulate you for your effort, and I think it's so important.
I appreciate both of the critics on Dr. Savalan's presentation, particularly Mr. Claire Wan Chun. You posed very important issues on how to translate the concept into practice. The practice here, not only a personal practice, but at the structural level. For example, distribution of income, tax reform, and so on, so that it can solve the problem of poverty. And right now, I think the floor is open. Oh, yeah. Ajahn Pichai, please make a reflection.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I actually do not have any business to comment on this because I'm the advisor of this work myself, so I know quite well what she is doing. But I think my job is to help defend her position rather than make any additional comment, because I see in the paper before and then comment before, and she actually improved that. And I told her before that I like her concept of differentiate happiness in 3 levels, from physical, mind, and wisdom level. But one thing that I would like to share among all of you, because I think what Mr. Chung have mentioned, I think it's quite important. But the problem is the Buddhism or anything, if you don't practice it, you don't really understand. You may you have some understand the concept. But if you don't practice it, it won't get into your gut feeling. Just say, to say like that. So this is the important thing. And I like to tell you my personal experience. When I was at the age of 55, and I start writing the book that I wrote called Buddhist Economics. And after I complete the book, I told myself that this is the first time that I begin to understand the teaching of Buddha quite clearly. And if I don't practice it, I will be a damn fool. So the key concept is that do you really understand it? And when you claim Thailand to be a Buddhist country, I would say that 80% of the people who say they are Buddhist in this country, they don't even know what Buddha teaching is. So that is a different thing. So how to get the idea and the concept clearly understood by everyone is also important. And in fact, I used to talk about the Noble Eightfold Path as the way to achieve enlightenment, or if you want to go to the end, is to Nibbana. But in fact, everyone can understand the concept and memorize that. But in fact, I just become a little bit more enlightened when one of my students wrote a dissertation on Jalana 15 Jalana and 8 Visha. That actually, that kind of teaching has been almost completely missing in the ordinary teaching in Buddhism, namely that there will be 15 steps of practice before you get to more enlightenment. Well, this is the kind of thing that people have to keep learning. Now, I could share with Mr. Chung one thing that, and this is perhaps important that we should try harder. When you say that the practice of things concerning environment and income distribution and so on has been much more strong in Northern Europe, namely Scandinavian country, Netherlands, and many other countries. I think one thing about the Western concept that has become part of their culture, if the practice is very strong. That is the concept of justice. And this has its root from Christianity. So if you believe strongly in justice and practice it, in everyday life, then you can achieve the level that they achieve in Northern Europe. So perhaps before we go to the teaching of Buddha, we should start practice the concept of justice to the core of its value, and this is quite important. So we want to make all the concepts more clear to everyone. And because of this, I also, this is a problem because the language also have its own culture attached to that. And in my work later on, I try to avoid the word happiness, because happiness is a very confusing concept in English. So I always use the term dukkha and sukha, and explain the concept that quite clearly. Also, the concept of wisdom in the West is not the same as panya in Buddhism. So this is why, and as a Buddhist myself, I know only little of Pali language, which is used to interpret the teaching of Buddha. And my friend who has been, very good in this, emphasize that we should all know Pali. But the problem is, now we forgot, in the old day, we all teach Pali. And I myself have been asked by my father to say to say the prayer, or chanted the Pali without understanding what it means until now. So I think this is a kind of thing that we have to understand clearly and start practicing, and then we understand. But if we try to mix everything together, and we will never find the way to the solution properly. So I at this point, I think if Shavalak is able to show what is the difference between Buddha teaching and the concept available in the West, I think it is the beginning for the West to understand, and perhaps they may start appreciate that. But if you want to go much farther than this, I would suggest that we concentrate on the culture of justice and defend everything for the name of justice, which is the way Christianity did. That will be a good beginning. Thank you.